hello. I did promise I was going to return to the Tashkent once I had it fully upgraded, which I do now, and I've been playing it a fair amount. Now, this game, first of all, let's start by checking tab. Worth noting, they have, every single DD they have can outspot me. But also worth noting, we have no capturing DD on our team. So usually, while I don't recommend for Russian DDs to push into the caps, if you end up in situations like this where you have absolutely no one else who can do the job on your team, then you might as well bite the bullet and at least attempt to go for the cap. So I will be pushing into A, even though it's not something I recommend for Russian DDs, but in this case we don't really have an option, do we? Worth noting though is that they really don't have any cruiser who's good at shooting me besides the Kutuzov. Baltimore, Neptune, Mogami, Atago, all of these have fairly slow shell velocity. The only huge issue there is, of course, the Kutuzov, because Kutuzov shell velocity is fantastic and the Kutuzov is extremely good at shooting DDs. So that's the one I have to keep an eye out. Since I've already made it into the cap, I'm throwing preemptive torpedoes out towards the expected direction of the enemy DD. I'm already spotted though. And since I don't run, I run heal instead of the smoke. It's one of the DDs, I don't know which one, but I can't risk pushing into that. There's simply too many potential enemies there, and you can see the detected number already going up. 5 people targeting me. Baltimore opens up from the flank. Just too many different kinds of 6 people shooting me right now, so obviously I have to disengage in this case. There's no way I can push into that. That would be suicide, because, well, of course, the concealment on the Tashkent is 8.2. compared to something like Shiratsuyu or Fletcher that can have like 5.8, so it's too much of a difference to claw through. So instead I'm just gonna keep the distance here, gonna see if the Kiev maybe gets lucky and spots him, but the Kiev decides to disengage even though he's smoked up, which is a bit questionable. We do get him spotted though, and I assume this is the Don squad behind me who's popped the radar. I instantly call target on the Fletcher, of course, and I start harassing him myself. Pushing him out of the cap and in general delaying the cap as much as possible is the best possible play we can get out of this. This guy has used his repair. I did break his engine though, which is of course good. He's got a broken engine and he's got a fire that he can't repair now since he already used his repair. So that's what, gonna be maybe 7,000 damage by the time the fire runs out. Actually probably a bit more than that. So that's gonna be a good additional source of damage. However, I still can't push in, even though I forced him away. There's no way I can contest this cap. The Kiev maybe can, because he's got a smoke, but in general, I'm just gonna start harassing the rest of the enemy team. In this case, I picked the Izumo as my target, because the Izumo is a nice, fat target that seems to be sitting almost stationary, and he instantly repairs a fire, which makes him an even more attractive target. The one I have to worry about though is of course the Kutuzov you see on my left. Both the Kutuzov and the Baltimore are shooting me. The Baltimore isn't a big threat. Baltimore shells are pretty easy to evade, especially at this distance because the shell velocity is so very low. The Kutuzov on the other hand, well, as you can see, he already hit me and set me on fire. I do use my repair instantly, and I am trying to create distance between me and the Kutuzov. I'd rather sail towards the Baltimore as long as it means sailing away from the Kutuzov. You gotta keep in mind the shell velocity of the enemy team when you're fighting. Something like Baltimore, not a big deal. Something like a Kutuzov, a huge deal. Of course, if you get close enough, the Baltimore is going to wreck you, but at this distance, it's not an issue. I set a fire on the Baltimore, he repairs, and I kind of scare him away, which is good, because now I can turn and focus on the Colorado. For those that didn't notice, after I forced the repair on the Izumo, I set 3 fires on him right after. So good fire RNG to start this game off, but it's good, obviously not going to kill him. 3 fires is nowhere near to kill a battleship. He'll eat some damage, but he's going to be able to repair it, and since he's reversing out of range, I'm going to struggle to get much done. However, I think... oh, Colorado used his repair as well, so obviously I want a second fire on this guy. I am fairly close to him, but I really want to get a second fire before he can move out of range. Because if I turn around now, there's not going to be anyone really spotting this Colorado. As you can see on the minimap, I'm very, very close to the enemy team. I'm the only one who's close enough. I'm just trying to get a fire on him, and I'm getting ready to turn away. I already got 3 people firing on me, and important to note here is that my speed boost has run out. You gotta keep that in mind, because when your speed boost runs out, you become significantly easier to hit. At this point, I can't push any deeper than this. I already got 4 people targeting me. If you look at the minimap, we see just how many people are on this flank. and how much of a risk it's pushing in this way. Baltimore is quickly trying to claw in the distance, and as I said, if the Baltimore gets close enough, he becomes a very real threat. Now, I did get one fire on him, but that's obviously not going to be enough. So, still 3 people focusing me. I stopped firing though entirely. As soon as I started turning, I stopped firing. It takes 20 seconds after you stop firing, and I wait until I regain my speed after basically hugging the border to turn around. Obviously, I didn't want to use the border to dodge the shells because that's pretty damn lame, and also you don't want to get caught hugging the border in this ship because you don't want the enemy team to get that close. Since I'm about to get spotted anyway, and I'm trying to see if I can maybe make the Baltimore turn into my torps, I open up fire. Once again, concealment 8.2, I would have gotten spotted now regardless. I was hoping to maybe make him eat a torpedo or two, but no such luck. However, my speed boost is now active again, which means I can create distance between me and the Baltimore significantly faster. And you can see my speed, 46 knots, going up towards 47. I'm moving away like this and actively making small dodging maneuvers in a ship like Tashkent makes you extremely hard to hit. The Baltimore is giving me a lot of broadside, so instead of using HE, I of course switched to AP in this case, and you can see the sort of raw damage you start doing with AP on a broadsiding cruiser. Even if it's tier 9, even if it's a fairly heavily armored one like the Baltimore, if you have a chance to use AP, you absolutely should. But 5 people targeting me is no joke. I dropped some preemptive torps towards the Bismarck in case he decides to turn in, which it looks like he is doing, but in general, I'm just going to focus on getting out of here. Now, I switched targets from the Baltimore to the Bismarck simply because if I want to keep shooting the Baltimore, I have to turn my ship more to the right, and I don't want to do that. I just want to create distance because this is a lot of focus on me, and I'm losing more health than I feel comfortable with. In fact, we're down to like half health, but I still have 2 heals left. And I used one of the heals. Note that I used one of the heals when I had to turn against the border because I was in dire need of healing then, or well, not in dire need, but it was a very risky situation. However, I'm no longer in a risky situation. I managed to create the distance. The big threats are far away from me. I'm fairly safe at this point. Even if I got 2 people constantly targeting me, I'm fairly safe at this point. Although 3 people targeting me at all times. I'm still safe enough that I don't bother using the repair. This is of course because I use and recommend Adrenaline Rush on my Tashkent. And this means that having half HP gives me 10% reload to my guns, which is a huge bonus. And I don't want to cut that 10% down to 8% for the sake of healing when I really don't need healing right now. In fact, this is something I very commonly see on my stream. People tell me you need to use your heal, like they're spamming in chat, heal, 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 when they see that I'm able to heal a huge amount and I'm not using it. But it's very much calculated. It's not that I don't see that my consumable isn't up, it's simply that I'm opting not to use it because I get more out of my ship. It's a case of min-maxing. You're getting more value out of your ship by not using the heal as soon as it's available because you are not in a dire need of the heal. For example, if suddenly an enemy DD or Kutuzov would pop up close range, then I would of course use my heal, because I would be in a risky situation. But my positioning right now is very, very safe. I'm right next to my team. I'm harassing a Bismarck that has already used its repair. In this case, I'm actually even stopping and reversing, because I want to keep harassing this Bismarck, because I forced his repair earlier. So if I could get an additional fire on him, that would be some good additional damage. However, it looks like he is going to turn away, and I'm not having too much luck with the fire. The great fire RNG I had at the start of the game, well, it's nowhere to be seen, and I can't get a second fire on this guy to save my life. And we can see more and more people, what their team is pushing up. Now, worth noting is that my push down this flank and all the focus I've been drawing to myself has actually been helping my team a ton. First of all, pretty much the entire enemy team came down to A, and obviously they wanted to push this A flank because, well, we're so few on this flank and the rest of my team is at B and C, but they've struggled to push this flank because, well, I've been just drawing their fire and drawing all their attention to me, but they haven't been able to kill me. I'm constantly delaying them. Every time they shoot at me and miss, well, that's damage they're not dealing, and in return, of course, my team is returning fire on them and dealing damage in return. So I'm kind of I'm playing the tank for our team in this case, and I'm not tanking in the form of directly eating the damage or like bouncing it like a battleship would, but I'm evading the shells. You see constantly fire coming in, I dodge it, I don't take any damage, and it's fire that could be shot at the Organizer now instead. I know this Baltimore is about radar, he's obviously pushing into radar, but I don't care. I'm sitting in the key of smoke for as long as it lasts. I got speed boost coming up soon, and this is some free fire I can get on this guy. Here's his radar, of course, but he's got a fire he can't repair on him now. And I mean, if he wants to shoot me, you can see, by the way, pretty humorously, the Kiev is closer than I am, but he's instead focusing fire on me, which tells me, of course, in fact I got 3 people focusing me, even though the Kiev is still closer to them. That tells me that they are quite pissed at me at this point and obviously want to get rid of me. But sailing away like the way I am now, even without the speed boost, I got 44 knots. And, well, this guy's burning to death. He's eating so much damage at this point. He's got no repair, and this non-stop rain of HE is going to burn him. I don't need my speed boost yet, because, well, the only one who's really close enough to shoot me is the Baltimore. And as I said, Baltimore has very slow shell speed. Close range, huge threat. Long range, not really that big of a deal. Now, though, I want to get close, and I want to start getting some harassment done. This game is actually quite close. We have only 6 ships alive, while the enemy team still has 7 ships. We do, however, have the cap advantage, because I've been delaying them so much at this cap. Constantly delaying and slowing down. Anytime someone has pushed up, well, they've eaten a ton of damage. The Izuma tried to push up, he ate a ton of damage. Colorado, I forced his repair, he turned around. And this Baltimore tried to push, he got burned to death. So the impact has been huge. And even though we're down a ship, we still have a points lead. But the problem is we're running out of ships on this flank, and I really don't want them to be able to push, especially since our Kiev is pushing into the camp, so I want to get there and harass them some more. We lose another ship, which is of course an issue. Drop preemptive torps. This is of course if the enemy ships insist on chasing me, insist on pushing towards me. These torps serve as a good deterrent. But worth noting is that I very rarely actually attempt to land these torps on anyone. It's more like if you push, you eat them. Also, Colorado decides to give full broadside. In this case, I don't even bother with HE at all. Full broadside like this, especially on a ship that has so much superstructure like the Colorado, that is such a fat and thick ship, AP is absolutely the way to go. You can see the consistent damage I deal. Especially, you see, I finally took some pressure. He landed a good penetration on me. So I finally used my final heal. This isn't the 19-point captain. I don't have superintendent, so I wanted to save that one heal for as long as possible. And me eating that penetration put me low enough that I was at risk of a couple of lucky battle AP penetrations being able to wreck me. So that's when I decided it was time to finally use that final heal. Now, you saw the amount of damage I was dealing to him, 2 to 3k damage per volley with the AP. And of course, AP, unlike HE, or it turns into medium damage, aka normal penetrations. Unlike HE and fires, well, HE isn't necessarily, but fires is of course light damage, and they can't heal quite as much of it, which is an advantage. But in this case, it was more the fact that you deal more raw consistent damage with AP than you deal with HE. Now that he's angled and sailing away though, I switched to HE because, well, not only do I of course want the fires, but it's going to be rough to get penetration damage if he angles away. He does turn back though, he really wants to kill me, and I think he understands that, well, he doesn't have any chance of outrunning me. But I'm gonna keep up with the HE, the consistent damage. I do get my high caliber because I want to make sure that we get this kill, because we are actually 3 ships against 6 at this point if you look at the scoreboard. The enemy has 6 ships remaining, we only have 3. So even though I've been doing having such a huge impact and drawing so much fire on this flank, my team has kind of been collapsing on the rest of the map. Izumo giving broadside. Once again, battleship gives you broadside. Well, anything gives you broadside. It's time to switch to AP. However, the Izumo decides to angle. I don't think it's so much that he's angling towards me. He's actually angling towards the Gneiser now that's right next to me. So I need to get more of a broadside if I want to make use of this AP. And that's of course because, well, he's probably quite saturated. We'll see how HE does. But the problem, of course, is if you spam a lot of HE target on the same ship, eventually their superstructure will get saturated and the amount of damage you deal will go down significantly. And of course now my shells are shattering because I can't hit his superstructure. He is aiming at me. I'm constantly changing courses. I'm trying to make myself hard to hit. I'm turning away from him. I really want this kill. You see, only getting shatters here. He's finally turning. Is he turning enough broadside? It looks like he is, but he has used his repair though. Finally I have enough broadside that I can switch to AP, which is of course a lot more consistent. I got lucky though and get a single fire before switching, but the difference in consistent damage is obvious here as soon as I switch to AP. And I do get the kill, and I even get Arsonist because that was the guy I burned at the start of the game. Now this is the fight that I've been avoiding. You've seen anytime the Kutuzov have chased me or picked a fight with me this game, I have turned away and I have avoided. And this is of course because the Kutuzov is one of these ships that have a great shell velocity, which means this guy is much harder to deal with than any other cruiser. Any cruiser with high shell velocity is a good counter to you, and this is something you need to keep in mind. You see, I'm already eating damage, I'm already set on fire, I have to constantly actively dodge, I have to keep my distance. I set a fire on him, he repaired, he set a fire on me, I didn't bother repairing yet, because well, I want to fire on him, and I'm not going to repair until he gets behind the island, because I don't want to have to eat a permanent fire. So I'd rather eat a few additional ticks of this fire he's got on me now, and then repair as he gets into cover, like this. They do have an Atago who's actually capping A, but I have a permanent fire the Kutuzov can't repair, and note that I'm keeping the island between me and the Kutuzov as I'm closing the distance here. This is of course very intentional. I get a fire on him, he repairs, all I need is one more hit, and I'm still keeping the island between me and the Kutuzov who's consistently burning. But that's something you really need to keep in mind. I do unlock my Confederate, but sadly that's not enough to secure the kill on the Atago, and the Gneisenau now actually secures that kill, which is a bit unfortunate. The game ends 613k credits, which for a silver ship is not bad at all. 171k damage. Perhaps not the most impressive damage, but I do get the Witherer, the High Caliber, the Arsonist, the Confederate, so a lot of damage dealt on this flank. Only 2 cap resets, but honestly it's always going to be hard to get these unless you have someone actively spotting for you. If we look at the team base XP, well, the impact can pretty clearly be seen here. Almost 2.3k base XP, 2.2k, which is pretty damn good considering the situation where we had no real capping DDs at all, and we kind of had to fill in for them and kind of pick up the slack for them. But when we move on to the stats, that's when things get really interesting. Damage upon your spotting, 46k. Now only tanked damage received 26k, that's not important, but what is the real big deal here, guys, is the potential damage. Look at that, 2.6 million, 2,643,000. That is what you might expect a battleship to be able to tank, but this was done entirely by evasion tanking. This was just as much as a battleship might tank, except this was done in a DD. And that's of course the advantage of running this heal-based DD. If you play it actively enough, if you are in there actively enough to draw that fire, you are able to... That's 2.6 million potential damage that could have been shot at the Gneisenau that was behind me, or could have been shot at all my teammates, but instead they threw all that into the ocean right next to me. And that impact should not be underestimated, and it's a very, very valuable addition to your team if you use it correctly. Also, I think this game very strongly highlights just which ships you need to watch out for, and how important it is when you play Russian DDs to know which ships have which shell velocity. As a rule of thumb, if it's a Soviet cruiser, stay away. If it's a German cruiser, stay away. Those two have notoriously fast shell velocities and can really mess you up. Now, usually IGN cruisers aren't too bad until you get to the Zao. The Zao has extremely high shell velocity and extremely heavy hitting shells with great accuracy, so the Zao is also the kind of cruiser that can absolutely ruin your day. But it's worth keeping in mind, which ships you can pick a fight with, and which ships you really want to enjoy. Which ships you really want to avoid. But in general, most T10 cruisers, especially IGN and Russia, are to be avoided. Des Moines shows slow shell velocity but huge rate of fire, so if you get close he can melt you, but in general if you keep your distance you should be fine. Minotaur, you should be fine. I mean, once again, provided you keep your distance, which you obviously should in a Tashkent. But things like Moskva, oh boy, you don't want to get anywhere near that thing. Moskva eats DDs alive. It's absolutely brutal with that shell velocity. And of course, same thing with ships like Donskoy, Kutuzov, Chapayev, Shores, all of these. Great shell velocity, great accuracy, great rate of fire, scary, scary things. And you need to keep that in mind when you pick these fights. As you saw here, I avoided this Kutuzov as much as possible, and it worked out greatly in my favor. Anyway, I might as well show you my recommended build for the Tashkent. It's not a fully spec captain yet, but it is a work in progress. Right, as usual, we'll start with the modules. Now, module-wise, the default range, especially if you run AFT, is actually pretty damn good on the Tashkent. And I think you can make do with just getting the hull upgrade first. Because the thing with the hull upgrade is that it gives you so many things that you kinda need. It gives you concealment, which is fantastic, and it gives you additional health, which of course scales extremely well with running the heal in general. Because the higher your base health, the more you heal with each individual heal. So I think you can pretty strongly go for the hull upgrade first, then follow up with range before finally getting the torps. Now the torps, as I said, not really, they're useful, mostly useful for YOLOing, possibly in some DD knife fights, but in general the torps have a fairly small impact. They're only 8 km of range, and in general you're rarely within that range, and I usually use them, well, kind of like mines. I drop them as I'm sailing away, and if they chase, they risk sailing into them, and it's kind of to deter them from chasing me too aggressively. So torps, not that big of a deal on the Tashkent in my opinion. It's all about the guns. Consumable wise, premium damage control, premium heal, absolutely. If you have to pick one first, pick the heal priority first, since it gives you an additional charge, which is very important. And finally, of course, a speed boost. Premium, if you can afford it, since it gives you so much more tankiness, simply in the form of evasion. Since this is an evasion tank, the faster you are, the harder you're to hit, the tankier you are. Makes sense. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1 for turret and torpedo tube tankiness. Better accuracy because your AA isn't really worth upgrading in any way. The values are pretty damn sad for tier 9 and not really worth it. Main battery mod 3 because once again guns are your bread and butter, so you want to buff them as much as you can. Speed boost, Spood Beast, aka engine boost modification 1, increases the speed boost from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. Hopefully you got this thing from Clash of the Elements or Ranked or any of the many different places where I've recommended you get one of these upgrades. If you can't afford it, get propulsion mod, because keeping your engine alive is just as important for keeping your speed up. Faster rudder shift, once again we're not sitting in smokes, we do nothing with propulsion mod, we are keeping on the move and dodging actively, and steering gears helps with this. Finally, concealment. Steering gears, possible, target acquisition, but steering gears, when you already have a rudder shift of 4.8, and in general you don't want to be knife fighting in the ship. If you give up your concealment, then you give up this 8.2 km concealment, and you get all the weaknesses of the Khabarovsk, which is the really terrible concealment, but you don't really have the strengths of the Khabarovsk yet, so I don't think it's worth getting that yet. So don't bother with concealment with steering gears yet, save it until the Haba. On the Kaba you really want to use it, but on the Tashkent I think the concealment is more important, since your rudder shift is quite good on the Tashkent without it. Captain perks wise, priority number 1, you actually have some choices here. You can go with either priority target or preventive maintenance. Both are very good. The reason why priority target is such a good thing for the ship is because, well, the Tashkent is more of a very light cruiser than it is a DD, which means that priority target is of course highly valuable. Regardless of which you pick as the first perk, your next perk should absolutely be last stand. Follow it up with additional tankiness, Once again, the tankier you are, the better your heal is. And once you have that, you go into AFT because you want that increased gun range. The Tashkent, of course, boasts a very impressive 15.2 km gun range with AFT. Once you have these 4 perks, you follow it up with Adrenaline Rush. You saw how much use I got out of it, how much additional DPM I got out of it. And once you have the increased DPM, you spec into Demolition Expert. Now there's some options here. You could also get the additional heal, but the problem is, of course, with running Superintendent is any sort of short games or any games where you eat a ton of damage early on and so forth. It's harder to get value out of Superintendent than it is to get value out of Demolition Expert. Superintendent is situational. The games need to last long enough. You need to be using your consumables actively enough to be able to get the full value out of it. Whereas something like Demolition Expert will pretty much always be useful in every single situation, in every single game. So while I do say that you have some options here, I still highly recommend Demo Expert. And Vigilance, while I used to like it, these days I kind of don't bother with it anymore. And of course, if I had a full 19-point cap, then the last 3 points would go into Superintendent. Flag-wise, priorities here are, of course, well, Detonation Flag, considering we are a DD. If you can afford one, it's fantastic on it. Followed by Speed. Once again, we are Evasion-Tanking, which means more speed, more tankiness. Heal, surprisingly. Once again, this is usually a battleship flag, but once again, this of course affects all forms of healing, including destroyer healing. And finally, increase your fire chance with these 2 flags. These are the 5 most important flags. You can of course add in additional things here, like faster cooldown on your speed and on your heal, not a bad thing. And but in this case, of course, I'm boosting my XP and my money since I'm trying to get the Kaba, which I hopefully will unlock soon, and I'll probably feature a couple commentaries on the Kaba later on. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this final Tashkent commentary. Well, final for a long time at least. We'll see if I return to the ship. We'll see if the ship changes or anything similar. But right now, I think the Tashkent is in a really good spot, and I think it's a very strong destroyer. It has its own niche. It's bad at contesting caps, it's bad at close range fights, but it's an excellent long range support DD. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.